Psalm 6. To the chief musician with stringed instruments on an 8-stringed harp, a psalm of David. O Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger, nor chasten me in your hot displeasure. Have mercy on me, O Lord, for I am weak. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are troubled. My soul is greatly troubled, but you, O Lord, how long? Return, O Lord, deliver me, or save me for your mercy's sake. For in death there is no remembrance of you. In the grave, who will give you thanks? I am weary with my groaning. All night I make my bed swim. I drench my couch with tears. My eye wastes away because of grief. It grows old because of all my enemies. Depart from me, all you workers of iniquity, for the Lord has heard the voice of my weeping. The Lord has heard my supplication. The Lord will receive my prayer. Let all my enemies be ashamed and greatly troubled. Let them turn back and be ashamed suddenly. So let's look a little closer at this. Very interesting. O Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger, nor chasten me in your hot displeasure. Rebuke is a strong word that says that you are confronting someone, and usually in a very emotional way. So, question, have you ever felt God is angry with you? 112 times the anger of the Lord is mentioned in the Bible. 54 times the wrath of the Lord is mentioned, 3 times in the New Testament. So, to give you a biblical perspective on this, Paul mentions that God did not appoint us to wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. So if you felt anger or wrath, Paul says God did not appoint us to wrath, but to obtain salvation. So that's a good thing, right? But you may have felt something else, and this may be something that you want to ponder. But God does discipline us, as he says in Hebrews 12. Your hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, all have had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for good, in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Interesting to think about discipline as a training, right? We are trained by discipline. And for what? That we may share in God's holiness. Very powerful. Have mercy on me, O Lord, for I am weak. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are troubled. This is the third and fourth examples of imperatives in this short psalm. One of the things that is going to be very important is our honesty in our interaction with God. We have to be honest, no matter what the situation is. Weakness is a part of our humanity, but we like to hide it from each other. We really can't hide it from God, so there's no reason that we should. David writes in a different psalm about his condition, "There's no soundness in my flesh because of your anger, nor any health in my bones because of my sin." And that is an important aspect. If there is some issues happening in your soul and in your body, we want to make sure that we stand before God cleansed from our sin, confessing them. My soul is greatly troubled, but you, O Lord, how long? We have often times that we go through where we are troubled. Our soul is troubled. It's so great. And we wonder, sometimes you don't actually say it like David, how long, Lord? I guess that would be just nice to say to him, how long is this going to last? I'm sure we're saying this about the COVID virus, right? This lockdown. How long will this last? So it's another confession and then a question. Something that's very important here is that questioning God seems to be something all of the people in the New and the Old Testament do. Doesn't seem to be a problem for them to do that. So why is it a problem for us? Why don't we do that? Return, O Lord, and deliver me. O save me for your mercy's sake. The fifth and sixth imperatives, both beginning with O or O, and O without an H immediately is followed by the Lord. But the sixth imperative also has within it an important element appealing to God's mercy. Oh, save me for your mercy's sake. Not because of anything that we deserve, not because we are so good, not because of whatever we want to put in there. Somehow we're deserving. We're not. We appeal to God's mercy. For in death there's no remembrance of you. In the grave, who will give you thanks? This verse addresses implications of not receiving God's mercy and healing. Death and the grave are our destiny without God's mercy or healing. But being in the grave, because of lack of God's mercy and the lack of God's healing, there's not going to be a lot of gratitude there. I am weary with my groaning. All night I make my bed swim. I drench my couch with my tears. He doesn't exactly say what his affliction is, but it has constant impact on his emotions to the point of overwhelming weeping, soaking his bed and his couch with tears. That's a lot of tears. So that is really quite the affliction. And what is very fascinating is that this place of emotion was David's familiar pattern. He never hid that from God. Do we? When we're going through that, do we hide that from God? Not that he's anywhere fooled or by it, but because we can't hide anything from him, so we try. We certainly can hide it from others. And there may be various reasons as to why we would hide them from others. Sometimes it's very difficult to be vulnerable, and it's easier just to hide and put on a mask. My eye wastes away because of grief. It grows old because of all my enemies. Another confession. An insight perhaps to part of this problem. Going through some of the issues because of his enemies. But once David began to serve Saul, even before he was surrounded and pursued by his enemies. Not just a metaphorical enemy, not just a figment of his imaginations. These were real enemies who wanted to take his life. So, very, very seriously, we also have enemies, but be careful with this. Ephesians 6 explains, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Our battle is not against flesh and blood. That means you and me. That means others. That means any person that's a human. Your battle is not with them. It is against the principalities and powers of the air. So in your prayers, your focus should not be upon those people, but upon these principalities and powers, against rulers of darkness and against spiritual hosts that are influencing those people. Depart from me, all you workers of iniquity, for the Lord has heard the voice of my weeping. I think this is very, very, it's kind of funny because as he's going through this, all of a sudden, he directs this towards his enemies, telling them to leave his presence. Are we so bold with those pursuing iniquity that we tell them that they should leave? Because this is all around us, isn't it? Immorality, evil, crime, wickedness, all sorts of sin. He also confesses that God has listened to his prayers. He has confidence in that. And we also can have confidence, as it says in 1 John 5:15. And we know that he hears us, whatever we ask. We know that we have petitions that we have asked of him. So, we have that confidence. 1 John 5:15. The Lord has heard my supplications. The Lord will receive my prayer. That's a lot of confidence. What you will see as a pattern is as David goes through the Psalms, he may begin in a particular tone which is quite negative, but as he works his way through, he begins to change that focus off of his situation and onto God. And here he does that. So he refocuses and looks to God. And while he does that, he changes the tone of the whole psalm. While we go through difficult times, we cannot lose focus on God. That he is with us, he hears us, and he will deliver us. It might not seem like any of those is happening. We might not seem like he's with us, might not seem like he hears us, and it might not seem like he will deliver us. That is the lie of the enemy. Do not give in to that. Again, David professes his assurance that God is not only hearing, but he's receiving his prayer. We have that assurance as well. Paul says about God, for he says, in an acceptable time I've heard you, and in the day of salvation I have helped you. Behold, now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. So what confidence do we have in Christ? It's amazing. Verse 10. Let all my enemies be ashamed and greatly troubled. Let them turn back and be ashamed suddenly. As he ends his prayer, it becomes imprecatory, which means he's enlisting God to bring curses or cause shame upon his enemies. We have a different perspective because this is before Christ. This is pre-Christ. So our prayers will be a little different. Our prayers should not be vocalizing these things against these people because of what Christ has done for us. So let's look at what that perspective is because of our enemies. But I say to you, here, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, but love your enemies, do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you'll be sons and daughters of the Most High. For he is kind to the unthankful and the evil. How interesting, right? That God's goodness extends not only toward us because of his mercies towards us because of Christ, but it also extends towards those who don't know him. Wow, that's a lot of mercy. So some of the takeaways. David went through great emotional times and he didn't hide from God. We are going to go through great emotional times and we shouldn't hide it from God when we're going through it. At times those emotional episodes will be overwhelming to the point of losing focus on God. We have to be careful to keep that anchor of all our emotions and our focus upon God. Imperatives in David's prayer life means that we should have them in ours. We should have them. So, we can be confident God hears us because of our relationship with Christ. If we're confident God hears us, as we're praying according to His will, we can use those imperatives. A fascinating psalm. And we'll see some patterns that are consistent to this throughout the rest of the psalms we look at. Shalom.